Good morning, everyone. My name is Trebby Johnson, and I'm a worship associate here at UUCB. We welcome you all to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Binghamton. All are welcome here who come in peace, no matter who you are or whom you love. As Unitarian Universalists, we gather in the spirit of love, encouraging each other in the search for deeper meaning and richer connection. If you're a newcomer, I hope you were offered a yellow packet at the door when you came in. In it, you will find a form. If you fill out the form that's clipped to the packet, we'll give you a name tag and a subscription to our weekly e-blast. There you will discover many events and opportunities through which you can connect. Also, please direct your attention to the bulletin board with the announcements outside in the hall, and also to your order of service. I also have the additional announcements. First of all, in the pamphlet rack next door to Douglas's office, there is this little booklet, and it's about Douglas's sabbatical, which will begin on January 1st and go through April 30th. In the book, you'll find out what Douglas will be doing on the sabbatical, what we'll be doing here, and ways that you can contribute during his absence. So check this out. Also, please note that there will be a single worship service Sunday the 24th, which is Christmas Eve, and 2 that evening. Also on Sunday the 31st, New Year's Eve, we will also have a single service. And thanks to our updated and newly increased seating arrangement here, we will be having only one service at 10 o'clock for the duration of Douglas's sabbatical, to see how that works. And finally, here is an additional announcement from Bill Thorpe. Please join us after the service for a unique and creative social hour. Coffee and tea will still be available at the counter in the social hall for free, along with delicious foodstuffs for purchase. As the social hall and fireside room are filled with wondrous handmade gift items, seating for those who cannot remain standing is available in room 10. Please join us and support our congregation and our creative friends with your purchases. And finally, it is our joy to welcome anyone who is new to the congregation. We invite you to stand and tell us your name and where you're from if you would like, and be welcomed. So welcome to all of us who are back again. Please join us for refreshments and conversation, which you can get in the social hall and mingle there or eat in room 10. And now, please stand as you are able and greet one another by passing the peace. The opening words this morning are from Leonard Cohen's song Anthem, and perhaps you can hear him singing as I do as I read the words. The birds they sang at the break of day, start again, I heard them say. Don't dwell on what has passed away or what is yet to be. Ah, the wars, they will be fought again. The holy dove, she will be caught again. Bought and sold and bought again, the dove is never free. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
And service is its life. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. At this time of year during the darkening days, every ancient story that we have ever told, from the solstice fire to the lights of the menorah to the Advent candles, all of these ancient stories whisper the same message: the light will return. You must go out and meet it. The great light will come back, but you must kindle your own little lights to guide it back. The light will return because you have kept an ember of it burning all along. Your hope, your faith, your resistance, your resilience, your love. These little lights, these lights within you and among you are important. Let us join in singing our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit, number 347 in our hymnals.
So this is an old Islamic story. It's called A Tent for the Emperor. Once there was a girl named Fatma who lived in what is now Turkey. Having lost her mother at birth, she was the only daughter of a man who made thread, and she learned this skill when she was very young. Her father was protective and kind, and also philosophical, and he never missed an opportunity to talk with Fatma about life. When business went well, her father seemed pleased enough, repeating what the Quran says: the outcome of all things is ultimately up to God. When money was scarce, her father seemed equally calm. He smiled and said the same phrase: the outcome of all things is ultimately up to God. By and by, some of this faith rubbed off on Fatma, and to others she seemed wise beyond her years. One day, Fatma's father invited her to come on a sea journey that he was planning to find new customers.
A few days after they set out to sea, a storm overtook the boat and capsized it. Fatima woke to find herself cast upon a beach, the only survivor of the shipwreck. Her injuries made her confused about the facts of her life. She couldn't remember where she was from or who her relatives might be. She knew only 4 things for certain. Her name was Fatma. She could spin thread. She had lost her father. And the words of a particular phrase, the outcome of all things is ultimately up to God. Desolate and alone, hungry and thirsty, she wept. She vowed, however, to be patient in her faith and to hold on to the wisdom of those words as if they were water and bread.
A few days later, a kind and humble family found her stranded on the beach and offered to adopt her. She gladly accepted. Her new family made cloth. Fatma, with years of experience using her hands spinning thread, learned quickly. Day by day, she improved her skill as a weaver. Day by day, she grew accustomed to her new family. And bit by bit, Fatma grew happy again.
But we can never predict our fate. And Fatima's life changed again. A band of slave traders captured her and carried her off with them to Istanbul. Desolate and hungry and orphaned for a second time, she wept. But lodged in her heart, she felt the presence of her father, repeating the words from the Quran, the outcome of all things is ultimately up to God. And she willed herself to be patient. Several days later, at the slave market in Istanbul, Fatma was purchased by a businessman to become his wife's maidservant. This businessman made and sold masts, the long post that holds up the sails on ships. His business had been doing well, but when he arrived home, he learned that pirates had stolen his latest cargo of masts. No longer able to afford to pay the workers, he decided to keep the business going with just the 3 of them: himself, his wife, and Fatima.
Grateful for being rescued into a good situation, Fatma showed once again her ability to work hard and learn a new skill. And soon enough, the 3 of them had a thriving business. Although she earned her freedom, Fatma chose to continue her work as a mast maker. Not long after, the businessman asked Fatma to oversee a delivery of masts to a place off the coast of China. Fatma, despite her fear of the sea, agreed to go. After all, she thought, what are the odds of my being shipwrecked twice in one lifetime? And then there were the words she carried with her, like precious jewels. The outcome of all things is ultimately up to God.
However, it came to pass that once again Fatima was caught in a brutal storm. The boat sank, and she found herself washed ashore in a foreign land. "How can this be?" she cried. "Why does one person have luck and another not?" But she felt the strength of her father's words in her heart. Picking herself up, Fatima headed toward the nearest village.
And it so happened that China, where she had landed, had a legend of a woman who would appear on its shores and build a magnificent tent for the emperor. Back then, no one knew how to construct such a tent, but the emperor wanted one. And so it was that when Fatma appeared on the beach, she was brought to the court of the emperor of China. "Lady," the emperor asked, "can you build me a tent?" Fatma replied, "I think so, Your Majesty." She had never before made a tent, but with her years of faith and patience, she decided she could figure it out.
She asked for rope, but none could be found that was of the right sort. Drawing on her knowledge of spinning thread, she collected fibers and fashioned them into the rope she needed. Next, she requested sturdy cloth for the body of the tent. But alas, none could be found that was just right. So, using her skills as a weaver, she wove durable, strong canvas. Finally, she needed large, straight tent poles. Once again, none were exactly right, so using her skills as a mast maker, Fatima cut and whittled and fit poles of perfect proportion.
And at last, with all the proper materials at hand, Fatma constructed an elaborate, magnificent tent. When the emperor saw it, a smile spread across his face. At last, the legend had come true. In return, he offered Fatma any treasure in his vast kingdom. She chose simply, "I would just like to settle here," she said. Her fame soon spread throughout the land, and she eventually married, and her children and her children's children could all recount her great adventures, along with the words, "The outcome of all things is ultimately up to God." Now, Fatma had some words that she said to herself, an idea that came from her faith that gave her hope when times were hard, when she was afraid or sad or upset. And I wonder, are there words that give you hope? You might choose different words than Fatma's, but maybe there are some words that you say to yourself or that someone else has said to you that bring hope to you. It can be hard to think of something like this on the spur of the moment, but if you have words in your mind that bring you hope and you would like to briefly share them, raise your hand and we'll give you a chance to do that. All is well.
It is what it is. My mom always said, všechno zlý je k něčemu dobrý, means there is always something good that comes with the bad.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
And this too shall pass.
There's a reason for everything.
Love conquers all.
Water always finds the way to flow.
Those are great. Any more?
C'est la vie.
Just breathe.
Just breathe.
Look for the helpers.
There's always light in the dark.
I think we'll end on that one. Thank you. And now it's time to sing Children and Teachers Out to Classes.
Next, we offer a spotlight from the steering committee. You may wonder, who's steering? Come on up, Eric.
Good morning. Early this morning, my wife Madeline and I went to the Vestal Fire Department Station number 1 for breakfast with Santa. We sat with a bright young couple with 2 boys aged 2 and 4 who were delightful and charming. 3 decades ago, when Madeline and I took our own very young boys to the Vestal Fire Station for breakfast with Santa, our children seemed to be charming and delightful too. Of course, I knew the whole truth. And so it is with joy and gratitude that I contemplate the solid, positive effect that this church had on the development of our children. And so I am glad that next year Andrea and Romney will launch a capital campaign to support the renovation of this church. They're going to do a lot. Today, I'm just here to talk to you about the launch of the silent campaign. I'm here to tell you that you can make contributions this calendar year to the capital campaign. Just write capital campaign on the memo line of your check and it will be done. The renovation job did a fabulous job on this sanctuary already. The roof does not leak. It's insulated with a solid high R value so the heat doesn't go just flying up to the heavens. And we can all fit in one room together. Thus we can experiment with one service this spring. So we have begun the silent portion of the capital campaign to pay back your fellow congregants who lent us the money for the renovations to our worship space. Thank you, fellow congregants. You are swell. And to allow renovations to the rest of the building. In November, the board voted to approve a detailed planning process for a building renovation that we believe will be a turning point for the congregation. We will hire an architect to listen to you. And building on the work of the renovation committee, to present you with 3 preliminary architectural plans for a vote. The winning schematic plan will be further developed by the architect in consultation with you, the congregation. Our goal is to present this plan for a final vote in 2018 in order to allow construction beginning in March 2019. There is much to be done in order to make that date happen. But 65 years ago, our forefolks built our church with great personal sacrifice and effort. Now we seek to use our many strengths to do this in order to meet the needs of future generations. So we have begun the silent portion of the capital campaign to pay for renovations to our worship space, and you can contribute now as you wish. But you didn't hear it from me. It's a silent campaign. Have a good holiday.
It is something that I delight in, that our congregation once a month takes a special collection in which it brings the money that it raises during our offering and sends it out to a group or an organization out in the community that is doing good in the service of those who are in need. This month, we are collecting money for the Handicapped Children's Association, the HCA, which means something else now. It's called Helping Celebrate Abilities. For years, we have been contributing to the HCA, and so that former name is something that rings in my memory. This is our Adopt a Family program. Through HCA, we, as a congregation, adopt more than one family, typically. We have the capacity to bring Christmas to a dozen or more people, whether that's a couple of larger families or several medium-sized families, we have that ability to help out. We also do soup sales, and there's a gift tree. The gift tree today is in room 10, and so if you wanted to take a tag off of that gift tree, it's over in room 10. I invite you to be generous in supporting this annual program that we have. The music for the offering is a David Wilcox song that you may have heard from the Faith Development Connections email that Ann sends out on Mondays. If you don't receive that, you can always sign up for it again. And sometimes it helps to turn the sound on. There it is.
You say you see no reason we should dream that the world would ever change. You're saying love is foolish to believe, 'cause there'll always be some crazy with an army or a knife to wake you from that daydream. Put the fear back in your life. If someone wrote a play just to glorify what's stronger than hate, would they not arrange the stage to look as if the hero came too late, as if he's almost in defeat? So it's looking like the evil side will win. So on the edge of every seat, from the moment that the whole thing begins, it has been love that mixed the mortar. It was love that stacked these stones. It was love that made the stage here and made it feel like we're alone within some scene set in shadow, like the night is here to stay. Well, there is evil cast around us, but it's love that wrote this play. So that in this darkness, love can show the way. And where else but in this world today to show the way? So now your stage is set. You feel your own heart beating in your chest. So this life's not over yet. So we get up on our feet and do our best. We play against the fear. We play against the reasons not to try. We're playing for the tear that's burning in the happy angel's eye. For it's love that mixed the mortar. It was love that stacked these stones. It was love made the stage here and made it feel like we're alone within some scene set in shadow, like the night is here to stay. Well, there is evil cast around us, but it's love that wrote this play. So that in this darkness, love can show the way. Show the way.
I invite you now into a time of prayer and meditation, first with words, followed by silence, and then the sharing of a hymn together, number 123 in our hymnals, Spirit of Life. I begin with this Advent meditation from my colleague David Rankin. During the Advent season, we celebrate the qualities of faith, hope, love, and joy. Yet these must be viewed through the prism of paradox. No faith is worthy without the capacity to doubt all things, for then it is only credulity. No hope is possible without the specter of defeat in the wings, for then it is only dreaming. No love is strong without dread of loss in the heart, for then it is only passion. No joy is complete without the certainty of sorrow in the future, for then it is only frivolity. Thus, it is wrong to mislead people with simplistic notions, for they distract us from the fullness of life. After all, the seas have storms, the clouds have lightning, and the roses have thorns. Yet still we celebrate faith, hope, love, and joy. Let us be in silence together.
Our reading this morning is from Rebecca Solnit's book, Hope in the Dark. 21 years ago this June, 1 million people gathered in New York City's Central Park to demand a nuclear freeze. They didn't get it. The freeze movement was full of people who believed they'd realize their goal in a few years and then go home. They were motivated by a storyline in which the world would be made safe for, among other things, going home from activism. It's always too soon to go home, and it's always too soon to calculate effect. I once read an anecdote by someone involved in Women's Strike for Peace, WSP, the first great anti-nuclear movement in the United States, and the one that did contribute to a major victory, the end in 1963 of above-ground nuclear testing and of the radioactive fallout that was showing up in mother's milk and in babies' teeth, and also to the fall of the House Un-American Activities Committee, the Homeland Security Department of its day. Positioning themselves as housewives and using humor as their weapon, they made HUAC's anti-communist interrogations look ridiculous. The woman from WSP told of how foolish and futile she felt standing in the rain one morning, protesting at the Kennedy White House. Years later, she heard Dr. Benjamin Spock, who had become one of the most high-profile activists on the issue, say that the turning point for him was spotting a small group of women standing in the rain protesting at the White House. If they were so passionately committed, he thought, he should give the issue more consideration himself. Causes and effects assume history marches forward, but history is not an army. It is a crab scuttling sideways, a drip of soft water wearing away stone, an earthquake breaking centuries of tension. Sometimes one person inspires a movement, or her words do decades later. Sometimes a few passionate people change the world. Sometimes they start a mass movement, and millions do. Sometimes those millions are stirred by the same outrage or the same ideal, and change comes upon us like a change in the weather. All that these transformations have in common is that they begin in the imagination, in hope. To hope is to gamble. It's to bet on the future, on your desires, on the possibility that an open heart and uncertainty are better than gloom and safety. To hope is dangerous, and yet it is the opposite of fear, for to live is to risk. Hope is not like a lottery ticket you can sit on a sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. Hope is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Because hope should shove you out the door, because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasures, and from the grinding down of the poor and marginal. Hope just means another world might be possible, not promised, not guaranteed. Hope calls for action. Action is impossible without hope. At the beginning of his massive 1930s treatise on hope, the German philosopher Ernst Bloch wrote, "The work of this emotion requires people who throw themselves actively into what is becoming, to which they themselves belong." To hope is to give yourself to the future, and that commitment to the future makes the present inhabitable.
Say no words, it is too soon. Say no words out loud, but wrap your quiet arms around, hide us in your cloud. Come rain, come down. Come rain, come down. Heaven's tears of mercy come a-running down. Come be clean, and bring the fairest flowers to meet the sorrows we have seen.
Come rain, come down. Come rain, come down. Heaven's tears of mercy come running down.
A little lower than the angels, we were born to be. Yet which of all the creatures knows this misery? Come rain, come down. Come rain, come down. Heaven's tears of mercy come a-running down. Heaven's tears of mercy come a-running down.
A few years ago, I watched a friend's life fall apart. After several fits and starts, my friend had landed a good job, settled down to a happy marriage, and moved to a new town. And then within a year, all of those things imploded. Last winter, I learned that another friend, one with a history of alcoholism, was dealing with a new addiction: prescription painkillers. Another person I know is swept under by medical debt, barely managing the ramifications of the medical problems, let alone knowing where to even begin with this financial woe. Countless others in my circle of friends and family struggle with anxiety, chronic pain, and depression. And there are times when the pain and the depression hit a spike and become severe. It is painful to watch. Where do you turn when you begin to lose hope? Where do you see others turning when you witness them uncovering resources of hope that carry them in the face of difficulties? The political turmoil we are experiencing in our country and in the world is unsettling. The mass shootings and the #MeToo phenomenon weigh heavy on my heart. And I know several people who have expressed a growing despair or hopelessness for the trajectory we are on in terms of climate change, income inequality, colonialism and war, racism and other injustices. If it's not personal trouble that tempts you to despair, perhaps it is the social and political climate that leads you to misery. The phrase, dum spero, sparrow, is something I saw on one of my friend's Facebook walls. It was in the midst of a time when everything was falling apart, and another person posted this phrase, and my friend said that it was a helpful reminder. Dum spero, sparrow. It is Latin, meaning, while I breathe, I hope. And I've since discovered, of course, that the first word is D-U-M, not D-O-M. Both spellings seem to be all over the internet, strangely, but D-U-M is the Latin for while. While I breathe, I hope. Where there is life, there is hope. Last week I spoke about the power of hope I reminded us that in the face of troubles, both personal and global, there are resources available to us to counter all the bad things. Yes, the world is drenched with turmoil and trouble, but that is not the whole story, because the world is also ablaze with love and kindness, beauty and grace. Last week, while talking about the power hope has, I reminded us that love and kindness do not cancel out the terrible things and the suffering. Instead, they ride alongside all of that. It's all that is good and holy and beautiful deepens the well and strengthens the walls. Therefore, the power of hope is not that the suffering and the injustice will necessarily be canceled out, but contained. Not halted, but held. We can't undo past pain and injustice, but we can respond so that the future can be different. Hope's power is that we can persevere and live. Dom spiro spero. That's hope's power. So how do you get some of it? Where do you turn when you begin to lose hope? How do you find hope when hope is hard to find? This is a deeply spiritual and religious question, and all of the world's religions have a response. I will lift mine eyes unto the hills, from whence comes my help. Psalm 121 is a beloved answer, the assurance of God's love and protection. Where do you turn for help, for hope, when things are hopeless? The psalmist responds in part, I will lift mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my hope. My help comes from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Hope is found in the Lord our God, as the Jewish people proclaim in this and other psalms, and the Christian people echo in Jesus. Religions the world over declare that hope is available to those who have faith. For example, hope is found in mindfully following the eightfold path. Or hope is found in the correct performance of certain rituals according to Vedic Hinduism, or in trusting karma. As shown in the story from this morning, Muslims read in the Quran, the outcome of all things is ultimately up to God. Where do you turn for help? Where do you look for hope when things seem hopeless? Knowing the answer to this will clarify what you believe and the root of your faith. I have an answer to this question. I actually have 3 answers to this question. They are my answers. I do not presume to say that they are Unitarian Universalist answers or that they should be your answers. Instead, I offer them as witness, hopefully as example, for you each to do your work in discovering the answers to our question, where do you turn for help? Where do you look and trustfully find hope? I have, as I said, 3 answers. My first answer is community. I shared some of this answer last week when I talked about covenant and beloved community as a way to tap into that power of hope. Growing up, I was bullied a lot. I felt like an outcast and a loser throughout my grade school years. I only developed a circle of school friends in the latter part of my high school years. My church experience was what saved me, where I learned to make friends, where I experienced acceptance and encouragement in a social setting. And one of the biggest lessons which gave me hope then and continues to give me hope now is the lesson of agency. The lesson that I have some control over what happens in life, some capacity to make a difference, some power. And more importantly, that when we join with others, we can make a difference. I have hope in the awareness that I am We are participants in the unfolding story. Making the world a better place is not a solitary activity. It's not done in isolation. Community is a key ingredient. Communities like this one save lives. We change the world. We make life sweet and rich and beautiful and brave. We teach our children to think positively, to look on the bright side, to find the silver lining. And at our best, we teach them that reality about how bad things do happen, yet in the face of trial and trouble, injustice and heartbreak, life is still worth living. I discovered there weren't just bright sides to difficulties. There was a brightness within me, as there is within each of you, a brightness that can transform the world. Communities like this one, like this congregation, countless others around the world, with our covenant and our loving, stumbling attempts to be good people, here is where I always find hope. What communities have fed you and given you hope? Might not be a religious community even. What circles of family or friends, groups or organizations show you your power, call forth that capacity to make a difference, and thus give you hope? Community is my first answer to that question. My second answer is the perspective afforded to me by time. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm not sure I've articulated this second answer quite the way I mean it to be, but for now I say my second answer is time. One place I find hope is simply in the knowledge that things are always changing. Nothing is static, and nothing has only one meaning. Therefore, despair is usually a premature stance. Looking back on my own personal history, I see what I have survived. I see the seeds of how I overcame and have grown into who I am today. A cousin of mine posted on his Facebook wall an inspiring comment this week. He marked the anniversary of his motorcycle accident in which he lost one of his legs. The post was recognizing the gifts he has in his life today against that moment from just a few years back. And he made a point, to be clear, he wasn't thankful for the accident. He was thankful for where it led him over the following years into today. In the long view, no matter how bad things get in life, everything changes. And therefore, there is always a possibility, a way forward, and that is a source of hope. That resonant line from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. shows this as well. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Looking across history of our country, across the history of civilization as a whole, there is a cause for hope. We can, as Unitarian minister Theodore Parker put it, see the continual and progressive triumph of the right. Parker's comments predate King by more than a century, but King put it so succinctly, and it rings in my memory. Parker's quote was, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. But from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice." Thus, time is a source of hope for me. The long view helps me keep perspective on my troubles and the troubles I see in the nation and in our world. This does not, I think, give us license to sit back and simply await the arrival of justice. We must act, do our part in bending that arc. The power of hope leads us to work for a better world, and it is a source of hope. The power of hope gives me hope. It's circular. And maybe that's my slightly confused way of articulating this second answer of mine, that time is a source of hope for me. And is it so for you? In what way does history or perspective give you hope when you are tempted to despair? Where do you find hope? Community, time, and nature. My third answer is nature. Nature is an ever reliable source of hope for me. It is a source of self-revelation, a source of spiritual renewal. It is a source of centering for me as well. All of that. Plus, when despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I do what Wendell Berry does. Well, not exactly what Wendell Berry does. If I did exactly what Wendell Berry does, I would go lie down where the wood drake rests in the beauty on the water, where the great heron feeds. I would come into the peace of wild things that do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. Come into the presence of still water and feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light, and for a time rest in the grace of the world, and am free. What Douglas Taylor does is go wandering among the hillside trees or down by the banks of the Shenango or the Susquehanna, travel up to the wilderness of the Adirondacks when possible, or more often whatever patch of wilderness is at hand. I find not great herons, but groundhogs, common ducks. I do still get the still water, though, and those day-blind stars. We all get those. The peace and the calm of nature carries me through my trouble and drains my despair of its power. It restores my hope. Likewise, the sea storms and the wind that breaks the trees behind my house is grand and humbling, and that natural power affects me as well. In a way, nature does for me the same thing I was describing about time. It gives me perspective. It doesn't take any of my problems away. It simply frames them in a different way. I find hope for my life and for our world when I spend time in nature, because in so doing I tap into the rhythms of life itself, of spirit. What are the sources of your hope? Where do you turn for help? Where do you look for hope when things seem hopeless? Knowing the answer to this will help clarify what you believe and the root of your faith. Remember, hope is not about escape. It's not found in turning away from the realities of injustice and heartache. It's in facing these things with clarity, knowing that we have the resources to make a difference. Hope's power is not in undoing past pain or injustice. It's in seeing the possibility of a different response so the future can be better. Hope's power is that we can persevere and live. Where, then, is hope for you? Where there is hope, there is life. While I breathe, I hope. Dom spiro spero. In a world without end, may it be so. Let us join in singing our closing hymn, I Know I Can. It's in the Teal Hymnal Supplement, 1015. no matter how weak or frightened we may feel. We each have gifts that can make a difference to the world. In this coming week, may we do at least one thing to support the broken, to welcome the stranger, to celebrate what is worthy, to do the work of justice and love. Be strong, stay connected, and each day act so that you may be a little more whole. Go in peace.